Hello and welcome to Verity Folk School. I'm Rachel. I started Verity Folk School because I am passionate about bringing old world folk ways to life in our modern day. And so today we are going to do just that. I am inviting you to come into my home and onto my homestead today. We are going to make butter. We are going to talk food preservation. We are going to harvest medicinal and culinary herbs from my garden. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about some handicraft projects that I am working on currently and share a basic mittens pattern tutorial with you. That's all coming up, so stick around. I always know that fall has arrived when my table and counters naturally become decorated with all of the pumpkins, gourds, and glass gem corn that I bring in from the garden. I love how through each season, the garden and the animals dictate my home decor and my to-do list. God's design with the seasons is truly perfection. Yesterday I went to a local farm store and I bought a bushel of apples, which is around 40 pounds of apples. I got a Jonathan apple, which is a great baking apple, and so this is something I'm going to use to make apple cake this weekend for my husband's birthday. The recipe for that is on my blog. I will link it down below. And I am also planning to do some canning with these apples, so I will probably make apple butter or applesauce and also can sliced cinnamon apples. The other apple that I got is a Gala apple, and these are great for fresh eating. And so I am going to do my best to store these for as long as I can so that we can eat fresh apples throughout the coming months. So the first thing I am going to do is I am going to sort through these apples and I am going to look them over very carefully, handle them very carefully, and any that have bruising or damage or anything that will keep them from storing, I'm going to separate those out so we know to eat those first. I am going to store some of these apples in my extra refrigerator. The rest of them I'm going to store in the cellar. And in both cases, I'm going to store them on a rack so that air can circulate all the way around. And I'm also going to make sure to leave a little space in between each apple and each row so that none are touching the other. Now, I could store all of them in the refrigerator or all of them in the cellar. Both methods should work. I just like to do multiple methods. That way, if something goes wrong, I'm not out of all of my apples. I also decided to dehydrate some apples as well as do some canning. So the first thing I did was I used my apple corer and peeler to peel and core a bunch of apples, and then I just cut the apple in half to get these nice slices. Then I mixed a little bit of citric acid into a bowl of cool filtered water, and I submerged all of the slices in here, and this just helps to keep them from going brown. After the apple slices had soaked for about 10 minutes, I went ahead and laid them out on my dehydrator trays, And I just made sure that they had a little bit of space in between each one, again, so that they weren't touching and so that there would be good airflow all the way around each slice of the apple. Once all of the apple slices were on the dehydrator trays, I went ahead and put the lid on, plugged it in, and set it to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, and I let this run overnight for about 12 hours. You know that your apples are done when they easily break in half. I store all of the apple slices in glass jars, and I like to put a little oxygen absorber into each jar as well, and this just helps keep them fresh for the maximum amount of time. These dehydrated apples can be eaten as is. They can also be rehydrated and used in things like oatmeal and muffins and for baked goods, so they are very versatile. I also decided to do some canned cider apples. This is a super easy way to can up apples. Basically what I did was I peeled and cored the apples again and cut them into slices. Then I simmered them in apple cider for 5 minutes just to get them a little bit soft. Then I ladled that into hot canning jars, wiped the rim, put the lid on. I left a 1/2 inch of headspace. And then I processed them in my water bath canner for 20 minutes, turned off the heat, let them sit in the water bath canner another 5 minutes, and then I just let them cool for 24 hours, and then I checked the seal. These canned cider apples will be delicious to serve over homemade vanilla ice cream, stirred into oatmeal and yogurt, and I am definitely looking forward to cracking into these this winter. In last week's video, I showed you how I make my own homemade yogurt every week. In order to make my homemade yogurt, I have to skim the cream from the top of the milk. And so today I'm going to show you what I do with all of that cream. I make butter, and I make butter using my Vitamix, which is a super easy and quick way to do it. If you don't have a Vitamix, you can also use a food processor, a KitchenAid, a blender, or you can even just shake it up in a jar. So the first thing I do is just pour my cream right into the Vitamix. I have the lid on with the plunger, and I have it on the variable speed around 5 or 7. And I'm just going to keep blending it like this. It's going to turn first into whipped cream. At that point, I want to just keep blending it, and eventually the butter fat will separate out from the buttermilk. So you can see here that the butter fat has begun to separate out from the buttermilk. At this point, I go ahead and pour it into a glass mason jar, and I just shake it for a few minutes just so that that butter fat kind of becomes one solid mass. place a bowl in the sink with a strainer, and I'm going to pour this out so that the butter fat is caught in the strainer and the buttermilk drains down below. Then I want to squeeze as much of the buttermilk out as I can. So I'm just going to very gently squeeze it, knead it through the strainer, and let the buttermilk fall into the bowl below. Once I've gotten as much of the buttermilk out as I can on my own, then I go ahead and put the butter back in the mason jar with some fresh purified water, and I shake that around. And the idea here is that the water is going to pull the buttermilk out from the butter fat. So here you can see that there is very little buttermilk left coming out, and I'm just going to squeeze it a few more times until there is absolutely nothing left. Then I go ahead and flatten that out on a cutting board, and you can see here there is no buttermilk coming out. Then I add some sea salt. Salt will help this keep as long as possible. So I just sprinkle some onto the butter, and then I mix that around with a spoon. Once that's all incorporated, I go ahead and shape it into a little block and wrap that in parchment paper. I also keep the buttermilk, so I just pour that into a clean glass jar, and this I'll use to make things like buttermilk pancakes or buttermilk biscuits. Even though it is late September, my garden is really not showing any signs of slowing down, so I have still been very busy harvesting as much as I can. Today I went out to the garden and harvested some medicinal and culinary herbs to dry and store for winter. I harvested some lemon balm, which I love to use for teas and infusions, some rosemary, which is a staple for seasoning, some calendula flowers, which is something I use in many different ways medicinally, in tinctures for colds and flus, and also in topical preparations. I also harvested some mullein leaves. This is something that I like to have for teas and tinctures for lung health. There are a few different ways that I like to dry my herbs, so I'll show you a few of those here today. The first way that I like to dry my herbs is by hanging them. This works well with herbs with longer stems like this lemon balm here. So basically all I'm doing is creating a small bundle of the herbs, making sure nothing is clumped together, and then I'm going to use some kitchen string and just tie a little knot around there, and I'm going to hang that up to dry for a few days until it is completely dry, and then I will store it in a glass jar. Another way that I like to dry herbs is by using wicker baskets. This works well for things like these calendula flowers or these mullein leaves where there's no way for me to hang them. Putting them in a basket like this allows air to circulate all the way around and helps them to dry efficiently. And the last way that I'll show you today is by using a clean tea towel. This rosemary had a little bit of dirt on it, and so I went ahead and rinsed it gently in some cool water. And now I am just laying it out on a clean tea towel, making sure there is space in between each sprig, and I will turn it every day or so until it is completely dry. As it says in my About page, there are always stacks of projects left to be finished at my home. And today I'd like to show you a little bit about what is in my current stack. The first thing that I have been working on is this Sawtooth Star quilt. I'm almost finished with this quilt top, but I still have the backing, binding, and quilting left to do. I've got quite a few things cast onto needles, and the first thing is this beautiful Aowen blouse by Fable Knitwear. I've got the main part of the body completed, and I have started on the sleeves, so hopefully it won't take me too much longer. This is something I started about a month or two ago, and this is the Beth shawl from the 2020 Little Women movie. And this is pretty easy to knit up, but it does take quite a while because with each row you are increasing, so each row gets longer and longer, but I am at the tail end. The last thing I've got going on are these fingerless mitts that I am knitting for my husband, and I am almost done with these. This is actually the same basic mittens pattern that I shared on my blog, and I will share the link down below. And all I have done is, instead of doing the decreases for the mitten top and the thumb, I have just cast off those stitches, and that creates this fingerless mitt. Here is a preview of my basic mittens pattern. You can get your free download on the Verity Folk School blog, and that link will be in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do enjoy these types of videos, be sure to subscribe to Verity Folk School for more on traditional living, traditional food, traditional handicraft, and traditional skills. Until next time.